The next topic is basically on tribal consolidation. During the Nehruvian era, after independence, the biggest challenge in front of the leaders was the second after land reform and all. Then the integration of princely states. After that, the biggest challenge was the tribal consolidation. So. Before we go into the topic, we just learn about the basic things or know the basic things. First and foremost is who are basically tribes, right now. So first, who are tribes? Tribes. If we simply give the answers that the who are tribes, so basically they have certain characteristic. Means tribes are homogeneous in nature. Homogeneous in nature, right? Then they are geographically isolated. Geographically isolated. Apart from that, they are signs of contact, right now. Means their signs of contact means what? They are basically culturally distinct, right now. Due to culturally distinct, they are signs of contact. Then distinct means what? Distinct means that they have a separate livelihood. Distance means that culturally distinct means what? They have separate livelihood from the mainstream society, right now. And apart from that, the last one is basically the information that they are they from 86% of the total population. And they are 75, there are 75 PVTGs. PVTGs means what? PVTGs means that particular particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Okay, so first and foremost is basically the tribes are basically homogeneous in nature first. Then second one is they are geographically isolated, and then they are basically signs of contact, right now. Due to the culturally distinct, they are basically signs of contact, and they are from 86% of the total populations, and there are 75 PBTGs means a particularly vulnerable tribal groups, right? So these are basically some kinds of characteristics of tribes. Who are tribes? If we basically describe that about the who are basically belongs from the tribes, these are basically criteria or the parameters, right now. So which basically told about that or describe that they are basically tribes. Now apart from that, the second question is basically the classification or the classes among the tribes. So there are basically three basically classes right now. Three classes. First and foremost, three classes. So first and foremost one is elite class. Then second one is basically the middle, and last one is basically sharecroppers, labor or labor tenants. So first and foremost one is elite class, then second one is basically the middle class, and then last one is basically sharecroppers or labor tenants, right? So if we define the elite class, how we basically define the elite class? Who are basically? So elite class basically belongs that during the British era, right now, the Britishers provide the ownership of land or forest to few among tribes. Okay. So basically during the British era, British basically provide the ownership of land or forest to the few tribes. They are belongs from the elite classes. See, elite, middle, these all are basically related with the what? Economy. And in that time the economy are basically depends on land, right? Then the middle is basically with secular education. It relates with the education, secular education, right? Then they known English language. Apart from that, they are educated, they know language, English language, so they basically got job opportunity. And so the emergence of middle classes happen, right? So basically middle class, basically whom they are basically known with the secular education. Then apart from that and they are basically known English language, and so that's why they got job opportunities. And due to this, the emergence of middle classes happened. And the last one is basically sharecroppers or the labor tenants. The sharecroppers or the labor tenants is basically due to the discrimination. See, one portion of tribe basically got the ownership of land. One portion of tribe they basically learn the English language, secular education, so that's a job opportunity. So but one portion of the tribes are basically they discriminate with such things, or that they have the backwardness right now. So discriminations or penetrations, penetration of outsiders, or they are basically suppressed by the outsiders, or they are basically what we can say, see the tenants right now, they are basically tenants. Tenants means what? Tenants means simply the labor or the agricultural right now, it with the agriculture. So the due to the discrimination, penetrations of outsiders, due to the suppression, actually hunger for land by the peasants from tribal. Okay, so they are basically discrimination happen with them right now. So due to the discriminations, these three discriminations and got opportunity, due to this the three classes are basically emerged among the tribes. So if we see the on diagram, basically the threefold structures, this one is basically sharecroppers, this one is basically middle to education, secular education, then they got English, they learn English language, so that's why due to this they got job opportunities. Okay, and very few are basically elite. Ownership of land or forest, simple. Okay, now so that's why in 1973 a commission basically stabilized. The name of the commission is basically Dhivar Commission. So Dhivar Commission basically established, and PVTGs who had, they defined the PVTGs who had pre-agricultural technology right now, means backward technology, then apart from that they have low literacy level, Then apart from that, they are basically backward in terms of economically. They are basically falls under the PVTGs, and around 75 PVTGs are there according to the Dhibar Commission. Okay, now the next thing is basically apart from these two, the next one is basically the issue confronting the tribes or related with the tribes issues. If we classify the issues in broadly the three folds, first and foremost, pre-British, so first pre-British era. First, then second one is basically during the British rule. During the British rule. And the last one is basically post independence. So in the pre-British era, during the British era, and the last one is basically during the post-independence. So in pre-British era, what happened? In pre-British era, the tribes are living isolated during British in pre-British era. And living isolated means where they live in hill, either in hill or in deep forest. Okay, so in pre-British era, they are basically live isolated either in hills or deep forest, right? Then during the British rule, basically, what happened? During the British rule, the penetration happened. Penetration of market forces Example, penetration of market forces such like example middlemen. Okay, then apart from that peasant. Apart from that, they are basically isolated, and their isolation basically disrupt. Their isolation basically disrupt. So disrupt of isolation. Example, decoys. That's why the various uprising happens, Santhal uprising, then the in this basically the Santhal uprising, the outsider who basically came from the outsider, they known as decoys, and they are the main enemies of the Santhal. Right now, then Munda uprising, Kol uprising, then the Santhal uprising. This all uprising happens. Then apart from that, due to the penetration of the middlemen or the outsiders actually, and so that's why the isolation was disrupted. And apart from that, the losses of rights over land and forest resources. Now, in post independence era, there are basically various policies are basically accommodated or given by the various scholars to bring the tribes into the mainstream. First and foremost, first policies was policy of isolation. The policy of isolation given by the Varier Elvin. Then the policies of isolation happen and given by the Varier Elvin. Then the policy of assimilation. The policy of assimilation. Assimilation. NATION. Assimilation given by the G.S. Ghure. And then the policy of isolation, the policy of assimilation, and the policy of integration. Last, policy of integration. Which is nothing, which is tribal pencil. There another pencil which basically adopted by the Nehru during the international due to the foreign policy, during the foreign policy, and this one is basically tribal pencil. Okay, so first and foremost is policy of isolation. We discuss about the policy of isolation. So the policy of isolation is nothing. Policy of isolation given by the Varier Elvin. So Varier Elvin says that please leave tribals their own uncontaminated by the uncontaminated condition by mainstream influence. Okay, so policy of isolation means isolate them right now. So leave tribes their own uncontaminated condition by the mainstream influence. So please leave their own condition, don't try to bring into the mainstream society, right? This is by the given, this theory is given by the Verrier Elvin. Then the next one is basically policy of assimilation. This policy of assimilation is given by the G.S. Gure. So what G.S. Gure says, see, the G.S. Gure says that he said that tribes is nothing, right? They are backward Hindus. So what G.S. Gure says? G.S. Gure says that tribes, they are nothing, they are just backward Hindus. Hence, they need to be brought within the fold of mainstream society. Okay, so what happened? The policy of assimilation is basically, in G.S. Gure says that tribes are nothing, they are just backward Hindus. So that's why they hence to need to be brought within the fold of mainstream, right? But Nehru they basically rejected both the ideas. Reason is simple. Due to the policy of isolation, they remains backward, and in the policy of assimilation, they have identical threat. Right? Isolation is not desirable, and assimilation will lead to the losses of the social and cultural identity. Identity means social and cultural, and it is not desired, right? So that's why they basically adopt the policy of integration. It was suggested that tribal areas are basically what they are progress, and they need to progress in their own way. Policy of integration is nothing. In this said that first they should progress and the progression happens in their own way, right? Means the identity consists as well as they not remain backward. Okay, now to give effort the policy, the another policy basically give effort to this, the another policy basically adopt. The policy is known as CONSIL. So in the CONSIL is basically, punch means five policies are basically added. If we basically divided it into broadly 5 to 6 policies, first and foremost is nothing policy of integration adopt. Then second one basically tribal policy of integration adopt, but policy of integration happen or developments happen in their own way. Then the next one is basically tribal rights in the land and the forest. Tribal rights in terms of land and forest resources. Okay, and these two need to be respected. Now the next one is basically no over administration in tribal areas. No over administration in tribal areas. Right. So what happened? Tribals should be trained to undertake development without too many outsiders being involved. Right now, less outsider involved. Less outsider involved, but the development happens. Next, tribal assistance. Tribal assistance should be sought in terms of managing what, managing polity and economy. And then the promotion of tribal language, right, because of the culture. And then the last one is basically the promotion of tribal language. Okay, tribal develops should be undertaken without disturbing the social cultural identity, right? Simple, the promotion of tribal language. So this is basically broadly CONSIL. So the three policy of integration, policy of assimilations, the two rejected. Then policy of integration adapt. In policy of integrations, the progress should be happen in their own way, right? Now the progress should be happen in their own way. To give effort, CONSIL was basically adapt. CONSIL first and foremost is policy of integration adapt. Then the integration or the developments happen in their own way, right? So that's why their identical threat was not there. Then the tribal rights of land and forest, this need to be respected. And then there is no over administration in tribal areas, let outsider involved, but the developments happen. And tribal assistance say given to be sought the managing in terms of polity and economy. Apart from that, the promotion of tribal language, this is happen, right? So these are basically some issues related with the tribal in terms of the confronting tribes, right? Now then next we discuss the general issues. Next class we basically discuss the general issues regarding the any kinds of tribes in India, or in terms of particularly the northeastern tribes. And then what are the way forward, and then lacunas, and then way forward, and some government efforts. These three things we basically discuss in the next class. So thank you.